Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Weekly Dartscast. Alex Moss here, back with another episode in our Darts Legends series. We're up to 15 now for the series. We had 2 episodes last week. If you didn't check them out, go and check them out. We had Dick Alex and Ted Hankey on the programme. This week we're joined by a 2-time World Matchplay champion, a man that's had a lot of success on the oche but also off the oche as well, which we're going to talk to him about as well, what he's been able to achieve with the PDC since he packed up playing himself. So this is an interesting chat. Hope you guys enjoy it. Here's our chat with Rod Harrington. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by the 3-time major winner, Rod Harrington. Thank you very much for the time, Rod. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Quite enjoying retirement at the moment, so it'll be hard to get back to it.
Good to hear. Well, we're starting all these episodes in our Darts Legends series by going right back to the beginning for you in darts. How did you first get introduced to darts?
Well, I mean, I think everybody back in those days, when I was a youngster, you know, when you went out or you met your wife to be, and it was a local pub. I lived in a very small village, and the local pub was the hub, and everyone was playing darts, and we had dart teams. So back then, I did play a bit of Super League and the odd county game, but I weren't serious. And then I'd come out of football as a teenager, and then went on to the building because most of my family come from the building. So I went on the building, met my wife, we started having children. So I didn't really play darts for. So I was about 32, 33, and then we took on a bar and to drum up trade. We started up dart teams, and the funny story is that Kevin Painter's mate come in, one of his best mates come in and mouthing it off a bit about how good Kevin was. So I said, well, time to walk back in here in a month's time and I'll play for 500 quid, which Kevin did. I beat him. And then we went over his place because he only lived at Tiptree at the time, which is only about 5 miles from me. And he beat me over there, and then I just started playing Super League again, so we kind of ended up practice partners, and that was when I started playing tournaments. So I don't know, if I hadn't have had that challenge match with Kevin Painter, would I have gone on to make it as a pro? I don't know. It was definitely a big turning point in the game, and Kev ended up a very good friend and still is, and we were practicing with each other once, twice a week.
Head into the 1990s, and that's when you really start to make a name for yourself, winning some big titles all around Europe as well. And what was it like going onto the circuit, the BDO circuit, touring around Europe and beyond, and playing in these events as a dart player?
Well, it was tough because you were turning up at events with 3,000 people in it. So you start off at like 9 o'clock in the morning. If you made the final, it's like 10, 11 o'clock at night. Remember the Antwerp Open? I played Dennis Priestley in the final. At 11:30 at night, and we started at 9 in the morning. So it was tough, very tough. But it was the only way that you earned your money. You paid the mortgage. I mean, I was very lucky at the time. I still had a small roofing business. I think 6 people working for us at the time, and we had the bar. So I had an income. So when I turned professional at darts, my wife packed up a very good paid job to kind of look after the kids. But then when Ryan came along, she actually went back to work a bit as well. So it was tough because I packed up the bar and the roofing. So that was tough. But going around then in Europe and travelling to America, the players moan nowadays, but what we had to do to earn a crust was hard. And, people say, oh, the game's better now. We had some tough players. I started in the game when Bristow was about Lowe, Lazarenko, Bob Anderson, and that was when Phil Taylor and Alan Warren and Peter Everson were just starting in the game. So it was a tough era in the sport.
Yes, certainly was. And one of your big titles, though, comes pretty early, 1991, the World Masters held in West London, I think, that year, and you beat a certain Phil Taylor 3-2 in the final.
Yes, I did. I mean, I was playing exceptionally well at the time. I'd won quite a few Opens leading into that, and I'd beaten a few players, on the way to getting to the final. And it's one of the matches that I can remember, but I can't remember, and I'll explain why. I was 2 sets to 0 down and 1 leg down. It was the best of 3 legs a set, and I looked to my right, and a bloke called Steve Pegram, who used to drive me around at the time, I remember him putting his finger up and going 1 leg at a time, and I could read his lips, but it was as if he was talking into my ear. And then the next thing I remember is hearing Game Shot and the Championship and seeing a red Team Durrow flight in double top. And I didn't know till then that it was me that won. I'd totally gone into what they call the zone or what have you. And that only ever happened twice in my career, but that was one of. It kind of frightened me at the time, so I played a whole game without even realise that I'd played. But from that point when went into the concentration, I don't think Phil Taylor got a look in for the rest of the match, and he was only 1 leg away from beating me.
Yeah, and things are really starting to progress for you then. You've picked up a big title in the BDO, and a few months later you're making your debut at Lakeside, which back in the day, at that time, that was the holy grail, wasn't it? Everyone wanted to play at Lakeside.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I mean, it was, and I was going into that one thinking, I've got a major chance of winning this. I had some tough players. I think I played Per Scow in the first round, and I think I played Keith O'Sullivan back then. I think I had a chance of a 9-darter as well in that match. But I lost to Mike Gregory in the quarterfinals, and I think I had 1 or 2 darts double 16 to beat him, something like 3-1, 3-0, 4-1, whatever the format was then. But I did have 1 or 2 darts double 16 to beat him, and then he hung on like Gregory did back then, and ended up beating me. And it ended up an epic final with him and Phil Taylor. But I felt that was one of the ones I let slip.
You're still relatively new to the circuit. You've only been playing on it a couple of years, but you've already achieved so much at this point with that World Masters. You've got to a Lakeside. What are you starting to think now? Are you thinking, wow, this is something that I can really progress further and make a real go of it?
Yeah, I mean, I started to win a lot of Opens, and I won a British Gold Cup, which was possibly the toughest tournament to win at the time. You had to win your Super League, your county, then go on. It was all the counties, and I beat Phil in the semi-finals of that one, and Bob Anderson in the final. So I always had an air of confidence in my own ability. I think that was the thing. I was very well focused, and when I was at my top, I knew I could beat everybody. So that was it. And going around and winning Opens. I mean, at the time, I was still a very fit mouse. Well, I still am, to be quite honest. I've been all my life. And coming out of a sportsman's kind of background as a footballer, I used to keep myself fit. And when I was playing in Opens or long days, when we used to get to 5 o'clock in the day, I'm thinking, yeah, bring it on, because I just always thought that I was the fittest, and so I could hold it together a lot better. And I think that proved to be the fact. There was a lot of Opens I won that I weren't perhaps the best player on the day, but I was the strongest. And come them quarterfinals, semis and finals late on in the evening, I just could keep my strength up and focus. So it isn't all about, being the best dart player in certain matches. It's the grit and determination to grind a result out. And I think I was actually very good at that, doing that in my day.
Definitely, and it's around 92, 93 time when we see a big moment in what turns out to be the history of darts, and that was the split, that the World Darts Council forming. What was your initial reaction when you heard the news that maybe something like this was going to happen?
Well, it started happening before that. I met a good friend of mine, and still is, called Paul Durant. He owned Durrow Darts at the time, and all the manufacturers were involved a little bit earlier than that, trying to convince the BDO to bring in people that were experts in certain areas, which they wouldn't do. They had a board of average of about 65 years old that thought they could still bring darts and business into a bit of a modern era, and they didn't have the expertise to do that. And so all the manufacturers and the managers got together, and they had meetings with the BDO, and that was when I went to a meeting at the Sports Federation, and there weren't really many players that turned up, although they stuck together and did well to stick together. A lot of them didn't really care about going to meetings. So I went to this particular meeting, and they said, would you come to the next meeting? So I went to another meeting in Doncaster, which John Lowe turned up, and it was the only meeting that John Lowe ever went to in the 3 or 4 years. He never went to the solicitors, and he was chairman and treasurer of the Players Association at the time. And then it kind of refined. The manufacturers kind of pulled away a little bit. Some of them, like Harrows and Windmere, went their own way. And so Tommy and Dick were the ones that really pushed the game. And they asked me to go to all the meetings. But just before that, I was actually the last player to sign on out of the 14 players. And that was only because I got threatened by Hollycroft and Dave Alderman in their room to say if I joined the WDC, you'd never throw another dart in the world. Well, I didn't take kindly to being threatened and still don't. So that was when I walked to Dick Alex and signed on, and then those meetings come after that. So it was a tough period, but it was a little bit easier for me because at the time we still had the bar, packed up the roofing business, and my wife went back to work. So we had an income without the darts. So it weren't a major problem for me like it perhaps was for other players. So, it went on from there, and Dick and Tommy, and that was when Edward Lowe took over from his uncle as chairman of the WDC, and, all the other people, Marcus Robinson, that are still in the game, still directors of the PDC. They kind of bullied me into representing the players, which I did at every single meeting, everywhere, right through the court case. I don't know, 3-4 years perhaps it went on.
Yeah, and we've spoke to a few of the players like yourself that were among those 14 players to make the move over, and of course Dick Alex as well, we spoke to quite recently as well. But wanted to get your thoughts really going into late 1993 into 94. It was the first WDC World Championship, and a couple of things that I don't think I've ever asked you before and asked anyone who was involved at the time, but what was the decision down to play the tournament just before the BDO World Championship?
Well, to get in their face, to say to people that, the facts are that when we broke away, we were the best players in the world. And what people forget is the Martin Adamses and the Barneys and all of them used to play amongst us and didn't win at the time. So all of a sudden, we moved, we had to do the split because the game was rubbish, it was dead at the time. So we did that, and it was to prove that we were going to have a world champion and the real world champion before they did. And it was ironic that, that a lot of players stayed with the BDO because now they become, and it's all over now and I don't want any niggle from it and I don't care. But at that time in the game, we were the best and they were the second string. And they now were the big fish in that pond over there, and that's why they stayed. And, it proved that we were right because where we are now and where they are. But it was tough because we didn't expect to have the opposition from the other players that a month earlier we were playing with and beating, and now all of a sudden we're not the best players in the world, which was quite, it kind of peed you off a bit, to be quite honest. There was a few very tight arguments and nearly ended up in fights back in them days, but we all got over it. And
the other thing I was going to ask as well is with regards to the venue that hosted the World Championship, hosted it for the best part of 15 years, that the Circus Tavern. It was obviously a great venue to start off with. We've now moved the World Championship to Ali Pali, but what was behind the decision to host the tournament there?
I don't really know. That was again down to Dick and Tom. I mean, Dick had worked in the music industry for years. I mean, he was the drummer of Vanity Fair, top professional band as well. So he kind of knew a lot of the venues. And of course they were moving it around, and Essex was always a big hub for darts and supporters, and of course it was possibly as close we could get to Lakeside at the time. So and the Stones were brilliant. They took us in, they did everything they can to look after us and make it better. So they were very hands-on, the Stones, the father and the son, and a lot of credit to them as well, because they really did help us out. I mean, that just before that first year, I literally was going around to every bookmaker shop, Labra's bookmaker shop, giving tickets away and going to pubs and clubs and, just to try and get a crowd in, because we were literally dragging people off the streets to come and watch us play darts.
And it's still very early days in the WDC at this point, but you've had your first World Championship. What was the general mood amongst the players? You mentioned there you were the players' representative. What was the general mood once the tournament had finished? What was the mood heading into the rest of 94 and beyond, really, from the players?
Well, we didn't know whether we were going to survive, to be quite honest. And there were people that were playing both sides of the fence. There's no question about that. That won't come out until I write my book, which I probably won't ever write anyway. But yeah, I don't blame them, those particular people in a way. Everyone have to look after their own backside in business, whatever business it is. But we were lucky to get through it. And sitting here now, thinking back on it, I think, how did we get through it? Because the amount of threats that we were getting, we got banned worldwide. We couldn't even Dennis Smith's partner got told she couldn't go and watch Dennis play darts. Things like that were happening. We got threats. I remember once I got an exhibition cancelled at the London Gym Factory at Langdon because the chairman of the Darts Association, the Essex Darts, went and told him that no one would turn up and he'll make sure of that. And I knew the bloke well, and in my face, he was nice to me, and so all that went on. Every player had that, so it was tough, and I can't praise Dick Alex and Tommy Cox up enough for them early days. Dick Alex was the calmer one of the two, but Tommy was like bombastic, I suppose, is a great word for dear old Tommy, who's not with us anymore. But he kind of bullied people into the right direction, and he never faltered from the straight line of where he wanted to take the darts, and Dick was alongside him, and he kind of kept those players. Of course, between them two, they managed a big chunk of those players, So they had a little bit of forcefulness with those players, and it was. Thinking about it, I don't know how we ever got through it, to be quite honest.
Yeah, there's obviously a lot going on behind the scenes at that point, but still, at the same time, you're still trying to play in these big tournaments, try and pick up some wins and do well yourself. And 1995, the second World Championship that you guys hold, you get to the final and meet Phil Taylor.
Yeah, and at that time, I believe I was world number one at the time in our system, and playing well. Had won loads of tournaments coming into that. I was one of the players that didn't have a problem beating Phil Taylor back then. Dennis Priestley was the toughest player to beat, to be quite honest, around that era. Yeah, I mean, I think I've beaten Peter Evans in the semis, and I was really up for it. And back then, and it's never really come out, but I actually had food poisoning for 2 days. And I think my strength went a little bit in the final. I think I had a chance to go into... I know I won the first set, lost the second set, perhaps should have won it. Won the third set, and then lost the fourth set, which I think I should have won. So, you look at things, you look back at things, you think, well, I could have actually been 4-0 up. I think Phil Taylor took 2 big checkouts at crucial times in each of those sets. But I'd run out of steam, and Phil just had the edge over me over that distance. And, but it's the way it goes. I don't even remember really until people mention it that I lost in the final. To be quite honest, there's only one person who walks away from any tournament in any sport, and that's the winner, and he's the only one with a smile on his face.
Yeah, and you did that a few years later in the World Matchplay, which we'll come on to in a moment. But just before then, the year before, the summer of 1997, the out-of-court settlement between the WDC, PDC and the BDO, that must have been a relief for you guys, and I suppose other emotions that you went through at that time as well, that this sort of thing was coming to an end and you could focus on building what you'd already started to build with the WDC.
Well, for 3 years leading into that, as I said, I was representing the players in every single meeting for the solicitors, and going into the actual court case. Eric was there because he was going to be the first one in the witness box. Not one other player turned up. Bob Anderson did for 1 hour and went. I was on the phone every night from all the meetings and the court case, telling everybody what was going on. And, I have to say that going into the court case, the listeners saying, you can't lose, you can't lose, you can't lose. And all of a sudden you get to the court case and they're asking you to take a deal, which I didn't like. And we was actually, when they said, the judge said, I think it was on the Thursday, he said, we're retiring for the day now. This will come back to this courtroom on Monday, and if it does, someone's going to get hurt. Literally to those words. So we was in the barristers' chambers, and the BDO people were upstairs, and they've come down and said, right, yeah, we'll lift all the bans, but it's a hands-off case. And the solicitor said, I suggest you take this, and the barrister's understudy said that. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you're not going to get any money or nothing. I says, but that's not right. Doesn't mean we win the case. So I said, no, I want to get some money to make sure that it proves that we won. And they absolutely said no, but I actually said, I'm the players' representative. Eric said, I back you, whatever. Tommy Cox said, I'm with you, and so did Dick. So we made them go up there, and they come down with a monetary gain, not a big one, but any monetary gain made the win more possible to me, more viable to me. So that made me a bit happier. And then, yeah, we could go on it. But then after then, we had a meeting at the solicitor's office, and all the debtors, because there was a lot of times we were on the verge of going under. There was one Friday when we all had to stick in it. Well, not a lot of the players stuck money in. A few of us did to keep us afloat, to push the money to the court case. But we had a meeting, and all the debtors, that was when the company was going to be changed from the WDC to the PDC. And so all the debtors agreed that they would take shares in the new company for their debts. And we were handed a form round. There was about 8 out of the 12, I think, were there, that we had to all sign to say that was the case. And I said, what are we going to get out of it? And they said, well, no, you didn't put any money in. And I remember this so clearly that I told the players, that ain't going to happen. We went outside, we had a meeting in the foyer, and I said, you've trusted me now, leave it to me. And I went in there and I demanded 2% for every player and the Players Association, and I demanded another 4% for Phil Taylor because he was owed £40,000, which in turn he got his money back when Barry Hearn came on board. And Dennis Priestley was owed $20,000, so he got an extra 2. So Phil got 6, Dennis got 4, the rest of us got 2, and the PDC new board had to agree with that. Otherwise, it wouldn't have gone on any further. I'd have made sure of that. The only thing I did wrong was I didn't get myself any extra percentage for all the meetings I've been to the financial thing that I never got my money back on all the meetings I went to. So that was the only thing I regret. I didn't get myself perhaps an extra 2% because everybody else took a little bit. But from that, Marcus Robinson, who's still a director, said, perhaps the players should have got, a percentage of what the purse was. So then I got hold of that. And normally, when I get hold of things, I don't let go. And so the original deal was, apart from the shares, was the players took 10% of all prize monies as because of what we did. But then when Barry Hearn came on board, he said, he had a meeting with him. We actually played golf at Whalley Park, and he said that I can't pay you. He actually said to me, I cannot pay you 10% if I put the prize money up to 10 million plus. And I kind of laughed at him at the time because we were playing for about not even $1 million. So I did struck a deal with him, and it was I think it was £2,000 every Christmas for 20 years. So that was like a little pension scheme for the players, and he agreed to that. And that's all gone now and finished. But the players have still got hold of their shares. I know there's a few of them. The shares are worth over £2,000 each now, and they're sitting on 200. If they've still got the 200, as you can work out, that's quite a lot of money.
Come back to yourself and your playing career. In the late 90s, you have 2 big wins at the World Matchplay. The first of those, 1998, and one of the best finals really to watch in the history of darts. You've got to say, 14-17 down to Ronnie Baxter, and you come back and win 19-17. That must have been an unbelievable moment to be involved in a game like that.
Yeah, it was, because he'd just beaten Phil Taylor in the semis, and so he was really on a high. He was a BDO player at the time, because him, Barney, and a couple of others had played in the early rounds of the tournament. But it was... I always remember Dick Alex saying to me, please win, because if I'd have lost, it would have given the BDO that extra push that they only left because they were over the hill, which a few of the players were, to be quite honest, but, the majority of us were the best players. So it was a gruel. I mean, I don't remember a great deal of it. I don't watch it on the telly when it comes on at all, but the only thing I do remember is the 1-2-5. And when I took that out, I remember walking back past him and saying to him, I've got you. And then he didn't get another double once we got to the tie break. So, yeah, it was tough. But, I did tend to make a lot of games tough, to be quite honest. It weren't... I don't think, looking back on my career, I think that's why I won so many Opens, because over the shorter distance, that was my game. Over the longer distance, I don't know whether it was loose concentration or whatever, but my philosophy was back then, there used to be 5 legs in between each commercial break. And if I win 3-2, every one of them I can't lose. So even when I was losing, I still think, right, I'll win this section 4-1, or I'll win that 3-2 and get back on it. So I never got the negative in my head, you know what I mean?
Just want to ask you about that 1-2-5 shot as well that you mentioned there. That was to go 18-17 up. I mean, the treble 15 and then the tops, it was something back then that not many people had seen on TV. Was that something that you'd done a few times before, and what came to your mind when you went to go for that shot and go tops?
No, not done it before. I don't think I've ever seen it done before. I don't think anybody had used tops. I remember wanting 1-2-5 and going, right, it's normally 25 or ball. And I remember looking, going, that's small. So I thought, well, I'll go for a 15, and at least I can still check out. I went for the 15, the treble 15, and I thought, oh, blimey, what do I do now? And I looked at double top, and I thought, yeah. And if you actually look, you can see a little smirk on my face. It'd say, yeah, this will hurt him. And, it was one of those shots that you can't explain why it happens. You pull it out of the bag and it works. And, I went on to win. And once I'd hit that second double top, I knew I had him. So, and it's funny because that checkout, when people talk about checkouts, a lot of, especially the older people, always class that as one of the best they've ever seen, which is quite nice, to be remembered for that.
And the following year, you retained the title in Blackpool again, another final going overtime, this time against Peter Manley, winning 19-17. So you've retained the title. How did that one feel to go back there the following year and get it again?
Yeah, that was great. I don't think I played as well in that one as I did the previous year, all coming into that tournament. I don't know why I struggled a bit in early rounds, letting people back into games, and I shouldn't have done. But there was a heat wave on at Blackpool at the time, and in that arena, it's always hot even in the winter in that arena. And I thought that Peter Manley couldn't beat me. He was a big fella. I'm the guy that goes swimming every day and working, and I could handle this, and keep my strength up. But fair play to him. He stuck in there. He was a very good player back then. He was a cocky man, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
You know, he used to try and get inside your head. But he couldn't with us. He tried with a lot of people and did, and following years, but he certainly couldn't get inside my head ever. But yeah, he played well in that final and pushed all the way. But it was I remember that one. It was a strange one because once it was over, it was the biggest bad feeling I'd ever had because all that pressure of going into it and looking forward to it, then it's all gone, and you have to try and wait for the next tournament to get that buzz back. And that was a hard thing to do, you know, when you won a major like that, and then you go into an Open. I think the next tournament was in Denmark, and I had to wait a fortnight to go to that, which I actually won that. I actually lost the number one spot by beating Peter Manley, and he was actually number one for 2 weeks. It was when I won the Danish Open, like that put me back to number one again, because we had so many tournaments you could have. I think it was 10 or 12 tournaments you could use for your ranking points, and I won so many that year. I had wins that I weren't using, so that was the way. So Peter Manley went to world number one for 2 weeks, and then I got it back. But it was a tougher tournament, I think, for me winning that than it was the previous year.
A few long spells as number one in between those 2 wins at Blackpool as well. Of course, you make the final of the first ever World Grand Prix, but just after that, a couple of years later, is probably one of your last big runs, 2001, the World Championship, and a classic game with John Part in the semi-finals, 5-2 down, you bring it back to 5-all, but John just gets the edge on you, and I think it went to overtime in that one as well.
Yeah, I think I missed a dart at double 9. He took a 1-6-1 out, and I think that was right at the end in the tie-break, perhaps, and he just nicked me. Yeah, John Part always says that is one of the best games he ever played, and one of the best games. He reckons it's one of the best games on TV, and it never gets shown. But losing semi-final, semi-final doesn't get shown very often. Yeah, I mean, I think that just proved the grit and determination that I had back then of not doubting myself and was always going to try and win. And it weren't shortly after that I had my first knee operation. And things went south very quickly after that. So, but yeah, I do remember that semi-final, and he went on. He got absolutely annihilated by Phil Taylor in the final, which it annoyed me a bit because I knew I could have, you know, out of all the players on the circuit at the time, I was the one that could beat Phil Taylor because I've beaten him so many times. Coming into that, I think I've beaten him in Denmark, I've beaten him in Saskatoon several times and other tournaments. So, you know, I weren't scared of Phil everybody, not everybody, but most people were just scared of Phil Taylor over a distance. He was so good.
Yeah, you mentioned there as well, you had the knee operations not long after that semi-final. Was that something that you had planned for a little while to get done?
No, I've always had problems with my knees. Like I said, going back from football days, from playing competitive football from the age of 13, and then going on the building and being a roofer, you know, your knees do take a hammering. And I'd done something, and it'd been niggling me for quite a while, and then it just went. I was going to do a promo in Blackpool, I believe, and I drove all the way up, and you know, the pain, and I got back the next morning, went to see the physio, James Davis, who was the Essex cricket physio then, and he just put me on the bench, said, I can't do nothing about this. I then drove from there to the Nuffield Hospital in Brentwood and see a surgeon called Mr. Lang Stevenson. And he said, right, what's your movements tomorrow morning? I went, nothing. He said, be here at 6 o'clock in the morning. And I had my first knee operation then, and I should have rehabilitated better. I should have rested up for a couple of months, but I didn't. And I went into the match play that year with a messed up knee. And because I didn't rehabilitate properly, it put pressure on my other knee. And then several months after that, I had another operation on my right knee. And then about 8 months after that, I had to have the left knee cleaned up again. So that was the end of my career then. I couldn't win a game. I had to stand more upright because I couldn't put the pressure on my right knee so much. That altered my throw a little bit, and then I tore a tendon in my right shoulder, and it was like one thing after another. And in the end, it was just, right, time to pack up. And the UK Open at Bolton, that was my last tournament. That was when I decided to pack up. And I did play the Las Vegas Desert Classic qualifiers after that, and made the final qualifier, lost to Wes Newton, but I'd already made my mind up, and I haven't actually thrown a dart since.
Wow, no darts at all?
No, I think it's 16 years I haven't really thrown a dart. Tell a lie, I did practice with my son once. He used to practice from here, and I played quite well, but I just didn't enjoy it, and I can't just isn't in me to play darts. And, I still get asked to do exhibitions, and I'm not interested. I don't even throw darts for fun. Well, so let's have a go. Now you want to play golf or I go fishing? Yeah, I'll do that. I will not throw darts ever again.
But you stopped playing the darts, but you're still well involved in the sport. You have been for the last around about 15 years, really, as a director of the PDC. How did that move come about? Because obviously we spoke earlier about how involved you were with the court case and the start of the WDC. Was that a pretty simple one, getting on board as a director?
Well, it all happened, good coincidence. Doors closed, doors open. You've got to push the doors open as well. They may only just come out ajar. And, that was the time when Barry Hearn come on board, was when I was more or less finished. And I'd come off the board, I'd resigned, because I was, I more or less run the Players Association for a good time through that court case. And then I got stabbed in the back from a few of them, to be quite honest, when it was all over. So I told them to stick it when the sun don't shine, to be quite honest. And I resigned and just got on with my game. But then when Barry Hearn come on board, I was out in Vegas and I actually had a row with him and the board of directors at the time over some rankings that had gone wrong, and it affected me, which I didn't think I deserved to, and kind of got snubbed on it. And Barry said to me, when you get home, come up to the 8 Northern ground, I want to have a chat with you. So I went up there. I got home on the Tuesday, went up on the Wednesday, and his actual words were, you're crap at darts now, so you might as well come and work for me. And those were his exact words, Alex. They really were. And I went, I'm not that bad. He went, yes, you are, and you know it. And I'd already packed up by then, decided to pack up. So I said, Ria, what do I do then? He says, well, I need someone alongside me in the board that knows about the game, because I'd already put reports together to how the game should go. That we needed to get ourselves out of the big opens where there's thousands. That's not a professional sport. Take ourselves out of holiday camps. So I'd already put together things where I thought the game should go professionally. So Barry came on board and said, look, come and work for me. I said, how much are you going to pay me? And he told me how much I'm going to pay me. I went, well, that's not a lot of money. And he said, I don't know if you're any good, though, do I? And I couldn't answer that. The one thing he's always had is it's a very quick and proper answer. So I phoned up my wife, and she said, what have you got to lose? So I said, yeah. So he said, then I'll give you the free roll of where we take this game playing-wise. And he said, you can have the last laugh as well. And that kind of done it for me. And, I started putting things together. And there was a meeting in Portugal, a think tank meeting, which I thought we were going out to play golf as jolly up. And he told me to put my golf clubs back in the house when he came to pick me up. And we all the directors, which we do once a year, think tanks, we all put our ideas together. And Edward Lowy calls it Rod's Rant Meeting. And, I said that, all of you have been around professional sportsmen, which all the committee had been. Barry, obviously, loads of sport. Edward Lowy, darts, cricket and snooker, and Marcus Robinson PR company for football and cricket and whatever. So I just said, well, so we've got to start treating our dart players like professional sportsmen. And we're never going to take the game forward unless we do, because it will just be classed as a pub game for too long. So I put the tour events together. I said, we've got to take them out of the holiday camps. I want 20 tournaments at £20,000 each. I want them played in sports halls. And I'd already kind of put up a diagram of how I want the cubicles instead of separate boards where you can see everybody, the cubicles. And so I put all that forward, and Barry went, right, thanks for that, Rod. And then the next day, Barry was doing his summing up, and he'd gone round the board and he'd talked about everybody else's, and he'd forgot mine, and I was getting a bit angry. And then he said, oh, and that's for you, Rod, get and do it. I said, well, what do you mean get and do it? He said, yeah, we've agreed to all of it. Well, when I went to bed that night and they were still at the bar, they agreed that was the right way. And so that was how the tour events come around, with all the new cubicles and everything. And one quick story about the cubicle, the first one we had made up, Mark Leake had made up at the Grand Slam. And I asked a lot of players to go and have a little practice on it. And Mervyn King went down. And I couldn't find him, and he'd been down there for about an hour. I couldn't find him. I eventually found him. So I Murph, and he went, yeah. He said, them cubicles, what are you going to do with them? I said, they're going to be our tour events. So you play on that, and so you won't see the players next to you or anything. So you're totally closed off. You'll only see the chalker. I said, what do you think? And he went, well, he said, I think they're absolutely brilliant. And I knew if I could convince Mervyn King that they were good, I could convince anybody. Because he did moan a lot about every little thing. So, it all come together, and then obviously after that, I wanted to see a youth tour. I wanted to find the next Phil Taylor. So that was when we started up the youth tour. And then after that, we needed a stepping stone from the youth to the pro ranks. And anybody that come off the tour had to have a stepping stone. So we come up with 128 tour card holders, which worked out evenly for the breakdown. And anybody that lost his tour card, we needed somewhere to go. So that's when I started up the Challenge Tour. And then from there we had care school, and if you kind of look at darts now, it's kind of mirrored how golf runs itself. And I took a lot of these systems from golf and looked at them and thought, well, that's perfect. So we'll do that, and that's why care school came on 128 tour card holders. It was the perfect setup, and actually still is. There's still, yards to it be improved on, but, we're still in our infancy, I believe, in professional darts. But I think I've made myself redundant with the PDC now because, there's not a lot more to improve overnight. So, I just get involved in the rules and regulations now and not a lot else.
Yeah, and when you look back to agreeing that deal that you had with Barry to come on board, and you look where darts is now, there's been a lot of things that have come on board, a lot with your fingerprints on as well. What would you say is the one thing that you've been able to implement into the PDC that you're most proud of?
Well, I think the Pro Tour, starting up the Pro Tours, getting us out of holiday camps where there's 2,000 people and putting us in halls where there's only... the initial one, there were opens, but then when we brought the 128 in, that was probably the best thing, was the Pro Tours, in proper sports, or, just 128. That's when we started to be properly professional in our setup, just not at the TV stages, but in our setup. And then, of course, Barry bringing all the prize money in, that just was the icing on the cake.
And another thing that you've been involved in as well is the commentary and the punditry side of things on Sky Sports. You've been doing that for a little while as well. What's that been like? It's
been great. I remember Rory Hopkins asking me at Blackpool, he knew I was going to pack up. He said, would you like to have a go at it? I said, yeah, I would do. So I had a little go of it. And at first I thought, I'm no good at this. I ain't going to bother with this. And when I heard myself on TV, I said, my voice is terrible, I ain't listening to that. Because it is strange listening to your own voice. But dear old Sid, and Dave Lanning, John Gwynn, three of the most nice gentlemen you'll ever meet. I know two of us are not with us, and got on with all three of them so good, and they encouraged me. And Sid was the nicest man you'd ever meet. And dear old Dave Lanning, I had some laughs with dear old Dave because he liked to go to golf as well, so I played golf with him. And I just kept in there. I thought, well, if they're going to pay me a bit of money, I'll see how it goes. And I don't think I tried to do anything that was not in my own remit, as in I weren't going to try and be a commentator, because the bloke that was next to me is what he does. I was just the pundit to add the extra of what a player's going through at that particular time and why he's hit the five, perhaps because it's come off the hand rod. So I didn't try to do anything that I weren't going to be any good at. But yeah, it was thoroughly enjoyable. I'm still doing a bit for Sky. I don't do as much as what I used to, obviously, because I think I was doing too much in the early days. But no, I have enjoyed that, and that's another string to the bow, as they say in business, that's helped me out an awful lot.
Yeah, and we'll finish up with a couple of questions in a second, looking at the future of darts and your favourite moment in darts. But just wanted to go to a couple of questions that we've had come in from a few people when we said that we were going to chat to you. The first of them coming in from Dennis Priestley, said to ask you about the race that you had on Victoria Island. He was that slow, I had the motel door open and the kettle on by the time we got to the room.
Dear, oh dear. Yeah, this is a great story. We'd come back from the darts, and me and Dennis used to room together a lot in them days, and we always having a little dig at each other. And I said, you're a cart horse, he said, I could beat you. Oh, absolutely not. We raced to the door, and we were like cart horses. To be quite honest, I was never fast when I played football, but we were like cart horses. And I remember we got in the room, and we laid on the bed, absolutely exhausted. It was a silly thing to do, but and he keeps saying he beat me. He didn't. I think I nicked him. I'd give him a head start anyway. I think, you're an old man, I'll give you a head start. And I think it was a draw. I'm going for the draw, but we laid on there. And that evening we've laughed about it ever since when it's come up. Yeah, that was fun. That was a fond memory of me and Dennis. We had some real good laughs, and he was a great player. I mean, they said in the 90s that Phil Taylor dominated. He didn't dominate in the 90s. He certainly did in 2000. But Dennis Priestley, when the PDC was first formed, he was the toughest player to beat.
And we've just spoken a little bit about the commentary. The next one comes in from one of the commentators on Sky, Stuart Pike. He says, ask you about why he doesn't have 4 scoops of ice cream for dessert.
Yeah, there's a nickname, and all the lads that give me a nickname, they call me 2 Scoops. Whenever we go out, I always have 2 scoops of ice cream for afterwards. I love ice cream, even at home here with the wife. She's always got a tub of vanilla ice cream in the freezer because I do love it. And so Pikey, when he's out with his wife, he always sending me photographs that he's had scoops of ice cream. But yeah, I only ever have 2 scoops. Ice creams I just love.
And the last of these that we've had come in comes from Keith Deller. He says to talk about the exclusion zone brought in as he tapped the back of my shoe while I was throwing. It took him 20 years to own up.
Yeah, Keith's not Mr. Innocence here. There was a lot back then. There was a lot of gamesmanship going on, and before we were waiting to go onto the stage. We were waiting behind the curtains, and Keith taps me on the shoulder and says, "Well done." Well, he always has loads of chalk on his hand, so now I've got a handprint on my waistcoat. So I said to Bobby Bourne, who's not with us anymore, get a cloth and wipe that off. So Keith's already walked on stage and gone, "Where is he?" Well, I'm a local man at the Circus Tavern, so by the time I've walked on stage, a bit of booing. Well, Keith, if you ever watched the game, Keith kept trying to slow me down. And, I mean, at the time, I was a tidy player. Keith's been a great player for many, many years. And he kept slowing me down and trying to get off the hook. So I tapped his foot and said, "Hurry up." So then he says to Freddie Williams, "Rod, just kick me." So when I went up and said, "Kick your feet yourself, Rod." And I didn't do anything. So anyway, we go to commercial break, and Keith says, I said, "Just get off the hockey quicker." So he kept doing it. So I tapped his foot again. And then he complained again, and I tapped it again. Well, the 4th time, it was a red card. It was a red card. It was a good tackle. I gave him a big kick. But then I didn't even realise or think that Sky had cameras on my feet. And there's, I don't know how many 100 people watching in the crowd. It was as if I was up there on my own. So, I did kick him. Yeah, I will admit that. But he deserved it. He deserved a good kick as well, because he was the one who started off all that gamesmanship, and I just finished it and beat him. So, and after that, I was still on the committee, and there was a few incidents where people were getting too close to the player when he was throwing. So I said, "Tell you what we'll do, let's have a line so you can't go beyond that line until the player is walking to the hockey." So, so it's down to me, the exclusion zone, I'm afraid, in both ways.
And, we'll finish up with a couple that we're asking all the people that we chat to on this series, and it starts off by talking about the future of darts. And I know it's difficult at the moment with the virus and things, but the PDC, we've got the plans to come back to get playing again. But what do you see for the future in darts, PDC, BDO, and the whole game in general?
Well, the PDC, I don't think the BDO can ever be a threat to us. I just don't think they will be, but I can't be. The darts, the next big step I would like to see is within the next 5 years, we move from the tour events and make them into European events, big, proper European events. We have the European events at the moment, but we need to move on from there and make them into big opens. When you've still got 128 tour card holders, but they will play on a Thursday down to, say, 32, and then have the finals on TV or streamed on the Friday or the Saturday, or Friday, Saturday, Sunday, whatever it is. But we have one in every country, in every major city, because I believe at the moment that the exhibitions are starting to kill us. Too many players are doing exhibitions in certain countries, which doesn't help us getting the crowd in, and that's fact. That's not just me blowing it. It is a fact. So, in 5 years' time, if we could have 25 European events, like the European Tour, I think that is the next biggest push. But obviously, I put it together last year. Well, I've had it together for the last 10 years, but really pushed it to the board of directors last year at the think tank meeting. 300,000 in prize money. So, you're talking about 6 million we've got to find to run these European events. But I think that as we go forward, it will get easier to do and find the money. But you can't have too many in the same country. I don't think that helps. So back in the day, every country, Norway was big, Finland was big, Sweden, Denmark, and all across Europe. And even you start now pushing with the way darts is in Romania, Bulgaria. If you're putting one big tournament and all the top professionals in the world are going to that, tournament, then I think we'll get the crowds and we'll get the setup. And now, you know, the WDF has disbanded themselves from the BDO, then there's a chance there to kind of perhaps get the WDF to work with their people in each country. I'm not saying that will ever happen, but that may be the ideal scenario, as in the future, to work so they kind of help out with the running of perhaps qualifiers, because you'll have to have qualifiers from certain countries coming in. So, that's what I would like to see, the next biggest step. But I retire on the 1st of August of 2020, so might not see it in my time as in anything to do with darts.
And finally, this is probably going to be a hard one to answer, given all that we've talked about. You've had a lot of great moments in the game. The World Masters starting off, the 2 World Matchplay titles, being inducted into the Hall of Fame, which we didn't mention as well, and lots of other things that you've been able to achieve in the game, both on and off the oche. But if you had to pick one favourite moment in your time involved in darts, what would it be?
Playing-wise, winning the match play for the first time, because the pressure we was under with BDO v WDC at the time. Personally in the game, I think starting up the youth tour, that first one in Barnsley, taking £25 in entry fees from these young kids, which I didn't agree with at the time, but the board overruled me on it, and watching a young kid called Jamie Landon pay his 25 quid, and I walked out of the booth and he was on board 1, and his first leg was 12 darts, and I could not believe it. And as I walked round watching how good these young kids were, I always remember it gave me a warm feeling that, yeah, I think this is possibly the best thing I've ever done in the game. And looking back on it, and the way Steve Brown has now taken on, and you know, I helped him out big time in the early days, and still fund the JDC. Yeah, I think looking back, probably starting up that youth tour, which led into all this, is the one thing I will get more pleasure out of than anything, because when the youth used to walk out of the room, even their parents used to call me Mr. Harrington and thank you very much. And a lot of dart players walk out of the room when they're lost. It ain't quite that polite.
Yeah. Well, Rod, it's an absolute pleasure to chat to you, talk to you about your career in the game and what you've done off the oche as well. So really appreciate you taking the time out to chat to us, and wish you a happy retirement when it comes around very soon.
Can I just add one thing to that? You know, with the PDC now, the Matt Porter, the CO, and all our staff, you know, it was built on Matt Porter, Hayley Scott, and Dave Allen, just 3 of them. And they run all the early days of the PDC. So I feel I've got to mention them, because they really have put a lot of hard work and are still doing it at the moment. In this lockdown, they're probably doing more work now than they've ever done with all the staff, which is about 10 now, to try and make sure that when we can do darts properly, we're up and running, and not going to take 2 months to get it up and running. So, yeah, I've got to mention them, because they've been absolutely unbelievable with their hard work and their professionalism.
Thanks again to Rod for joining us, and if you've been enjoying our Darts Legends series over the last couple of months and any of the content that we've been putting out recently, then go and check us out on Patreon if you fancy giving us a little bit of support on there. Patreon.com/Weekly Dartscast, and there's a few benefits for each Patreon tier that you want to join up with, so anyone who wants to go and support us on that, we do appreciate it. We're going to be back on Thursday, myself and Burton DeWitt, bringing you a regular episode of the podcast. We're going to be hopefully joined by a few guests as well, and looking ahead to the return of the PDC Tour. It's been a little while, hasn't it? Yes, we're going to be back with some action to look ahead to the PDC Summer Series 5 Players Championship event taking place next week, and we'll be back this Thursday to look ahead to it all. But until then, hang tight.